Man, let's bring in Mr. Pick and Roll, Avery Johnson. We saw a lot there with those two games, but let's start with the other one from first four to Final Four for the Bruins. I mean, dancing, upsetting their way over Michigan. What did you see from Mick Cronin and his group?
Well, they're not apologizing for being on the big stage. They've earned the right to be in the Final Four. Like you said, they started in the first four, so that means they play one more game than the rest of the teams. But they've earned it. They've played hard. They understand where their strengths and weaknesses are. Jules Bernard carried them in the first half against Alabama in the Sweet 16, and then Johnny Juzang was just spectacular. Here's a kid, you talking about how a change of scenery has done a kid well, transferring from Kentucky back to where he's from, LA. Man, this kid was amazing. So they've earned the right to be here. No apologies necessary. And I know Mick Cronin is going to have them fired up to go against Gonzaga.
You mentioned Johnny Juzang. I mean, he's the first player to score at least half of his team's points since the Big O did it back in 1960. What has he meant to this team up to this point? You know, plugging him in there or against Cronin for his team. What has he meant when you're talking about one of those leaders at this time of year?
Well, he's an elite talent. You know, I recruited this kid when I was coaching in college, and I saw him when he was in 7th grade. And just the skill set, the basketball IQ, the size, you know, for a two guard. The footwork, he can play at all three levels at the basket in between the three-point shot. But, when he was at Kentucky, he just looked like he was frustrated and he really just didn't get it. But another year to mature, off season, transferred to UCLA, little home cooking has done him really well.
So, of course, we're happy that they made it this far, but the next step, you got to deal with Gonzaga. We saw what they did to USC and Evan Mobley. I mentioned, this is a kid that could be a top 5 pick. He was almost, invisible in this game. What Drew Timme and Corey Crisper, what they did to him in the paint. If you're Mick Cronin, how do you coach up your group taking on the Zags in this next one?
Well, even though UCLA likes to play fast, I thought they've done a really nice job in their last 2 games of controlling the tempo. Sure, if you get a steal and a fast break, go and score the ball. But once Gonzaga gets their defense set, you have to make their defense move so that you can take really quality shots, take care of the ball, because they're only averaging about 8 turnovers in the last 3 games. So take care of the ball, which then will allow them to get their defense set, because that's the biggest key, is getting your defense set so that you can match up with Gonzaga and then try to, Kispert, Drew Timme, just play them to their strengths and weaknesses, but they must control the tempo.
Coach, the million-dollar question is, if you're the Bruins, do the Zags have a weakness? I mean, is there anything you can find based on their game that they have a weakness up to this point?
Nothing glaring, no glaring weakness. But again, we're in the Final Four. The Zags have had an incredible run. That doesn't mean that UCLA can't beat them. I mean, nobody's unbeatable at this point, even though the Zags haven't lost. But at this point in the Final Four, anything can happen. And all UCLA needs to do is have a better night than Gonzaga, and they'll have an opportunity to win, especially if they take care of the ball.
With that being said, your first impression of the Final Four, you got the Zags, the best team in the nation. Baylor been hot lately. Houston showing their defensive juggernaut up until this point. And UCLA, they just keep on dancing. What's your first impression of these 4 teams?
Well, we've talked a lot, obviously, about UCLA and Gonzaga, but I'm really intrigued with this Houston-Baylor matchup, especially at the backcourt in the guard position. You have Jared Butler, arguably one of the top, 3 or 4 players in the country, going up against Dejan Jarreau, one of the top defenders in the country. And then you have Quentin Grimes and Davion Mitchell. So this is must-see TV in terms of how these backcourts are going to compete against one another. And then from a team standpoint, you have a 3-point shooting team in Baylor who's real prolific from the 3-point line, even though they haven't shot it as well in the tournament. And then a significantly tough physical rebounding team in Houston, where sometimes their best shot is a missed shot.
I think all of us want to see that Baylor and Gonzaga matchup when we're talking about anything when it comes to that championship. Of course, both of those teams have to get past, of course, a UCLA and a Houston team that's been fighting up to this point. So far, we got 2 number 1s, a number 2, and 11, of course, in the Bruins. So we'll see how that all pans out. Avery Johnson, as always, my friend, appreciate you tapping in. Mr. Pick and Roll, take care. Don't forget, you can catch everything on the Eye of College Basketball podcast. Look, all the guys have been busy. Gary Parrish has been doing work up north. And you got Matt Norlander. He's been in Indy at home, back to Indy. He's going to be busy. Those guys, of course, keeping you tapped in. Download and give the pod a follow here.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.